All right, this is the second video for this section. There's also laws for us to report incompetent practice. For RNs, here's a link, and then there's also another one for physicians. Just remember when you're doing these kinds of things that you made sure that you've gone through the chain of command where you work. All right, don't jump to let me, report this nurse or this doctor. Talk to the supervisor and try that route first. You have a legal responsibility to report unsafe staffing, or at least bring it up. Knowledge of equipment operations, policy and procedures. And then here again, it says use the chain of command in reporting inadequate care by a physician, mandatory overtime, and improper or substandard care. Product liability. This is the thing that, sorry, as a nurse, you are liable for if the equipment works right. However, if the equipment malfunctions, the people who made the equipment might have a higher liability than you do, the person using it. And the biggest way to reduce your risk is to practice within your scope. All right. If you stay within your scope of practice, you should be okay. Remember when we talked about Sister Maria, she was within her scope of practice and she made a mistake. And this whole idea of professional liability insurance, if you're going to be a traveler, I think that's a great thing to have. And if you always put the patients first and their welfare first, know the policies and procedures, and if something happens and you don't know the policy and procedure off the top of your head, and you have to do something, put the patient first. Okay, enough said. Informed consent is a big deal. Informed consent is the legal age is 18, or if you're an emancipated minor, and you have to be competent. You have to have the ability to understand. Informed consent has to be voluntary. There can be no fraud or deceit or coercion. And you have to give them sufficient information, and you have to keep in mind health literacy. Also keep in mind that as the nurse, you are only witnessing the signature. It is not the nurse's job to obtain informed consent. That is the physician or the person doing the procedure. Okay, there's some things that a minor can consent to, and that's STD treatment, alcohol or drug abuse treatment, pregnancy treatment, except abortion in Wisconsin. So every state is different with abortion. Okay, Wisconsin, now you have to have someone over 18. No, it can be any relative over 18. Oh, over 25. I'm wrong. Know the laws of the state is really the main key point when it comes to abortion. Okay, and some more things. So what's required is explanation of the treatment or procedure, the risks, what's likely to happen if you don't do the procedure, what you can do, what other things you can do if you don't, the person performing and the name. That's why the name is written out huge. And the idea that they can withdraw their consent at any time. Anytime they can change their mind and say no. All right. A licensed person can witness the patient signing the consent form. That's it. You're just witnessing their signature. If they start to ask questions that makes you think they don't understand what's happening, then you have to tell. Now, if they say, how long will it take? And you say 45 minutes, that's different. This is if they start to question, and because you're a professional, you're thinking, I'm not sure they understand what they're consenting to, then you have to call the doctor. But you are just witnessing their signature. There are other consents. If you're doing research, you have to get a consent. You have to tell people what you're researching. The information has to be understandable. And then there's this institutional review board that looks over your research, and it protects the right and welfare of the research subjects. There's the idea of privacy, right? And patients have the right to be protected against unreasonable and unwarranted interference with their solitude. This extends to the patient's reputation. This includes name and picture, intrusion, publicating facts that put the patient in a false light, or disclosure about privacy facts about the patient to the institution or staff. An example of this is he's having an affair, or she's having an affair. We did have a patient die, and the wife was at the bedside, and it was in the middle of the night, and so the ER called and said, we have a woman down here that says that she's the girlfriend of the patient that just died, and she was called, and she wanted to come up. So we could not go in and say, hey, lady, you got to leave. This other woman wants to come see your dead husband. Okay, because that would have been a violation of his rights to privacy. Okay, yeah, we did a song and tap dance. They both got to say goodbye. Okay, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. The main reason of this act was so that people could take their health insurance with them. Before 1996, if you were to quit one job and start another job, your health insurance started all over and you had to satisfy what was known as a pre-existing condition, meaning that if your kid had an earache 2 days before you got health insurance or your new health insurance, any earache your kid got after that wouldn't be covered. And this act made that so that couldn't happen anymore. So as long as you have continuing coverage, you don't have to satisfy any new pre-existing conditions. But what was tacked onto that act was the idea of confidentiality. And that's what affects us in healthcare more than anything else. Okay, so with confidentiality, you have the right to privacy of your medical record. You can view your own record. You can request copies, although they'll charge you. Phone calls by family requesting patient information, you don't have to agree to that. And then incident reports. Remember that an incident report is an internal document. It is not to be part of the patient record. It shouldn't be included. Do not use statements of guilt. Don't say Nurse Susie was so stupid and she shouldn't have done what she did. Okay? And it can't be used in court unless you tell the patient we filled out an incident report. I think we talked this to death. And here's just a copy of an incident report. All right, risk management. Remember I talked to you last week, risk managers are employed by the institution to protect them from financial risks, losses, so it helps them not to get sued. They look at the incident reports and then they decide if there's system issues and if they can't update the policies and the procedures to close some of those gaps. And here are some examples of the employment laws that have happened. And employment at will. So that means that you're an at-will employee. You're there because you want to be. And it protects you against wrongful termination. Okay? They can't terminate you for speaking out against unsafe practices. They can't terminate you for violating federal laws and reporting it or filing lawsuits. They can't fire you if you're doing anything that you are in good faith. So they can't turn around and say, because you did this, we're firing you. They can't fire you because you had jury duty, whistleblowing. Here's my story about that. So I worked with this woman in hospice, and she came up to me one day and said, Leah, do you want to go for the money with me? I had no idea what she was talking about. I was trying to train her. She was a little odd. And so I kind of ignored her. Come to find out 3 years later, she's a millionaire because the hospice I worked for was violating federal laws about who was on hospice and who wasn't. So she got a percentage of what they got back. Yep, true story. Here I am talking to you. All right. The next few slides are some definitions, and I'm going to try to get through them in the next 5 minutes, and then there'll be a third presentation. All right, an intentional tort. An intentional tort is legal wrongs committed against a person, property. Okay, so here are types of intentional torts. There's assault. Assault is if you make somebody afraid you're going to hurt them. That's considered assault. Battery is if you actually hurt them. I don't know why there's a picture of breastfeeding. Maybe somebody thinks that's offensive. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. Just roll with it. False imprisonment. Remember, false imprisonment can be restraints, physical, emotional, or chemical restraints. And defamation. Defamation is libel or written, or there's slander, which is spoken. Okay, those are the different kinds of intentional torts. All right. So then there's the Patient Self-Determination Act, which is just as the name implies. The patient can determine for themselves what they want. Just because we can do something doesn't mean we have to do something. And I have a link on Moodle about advanced directives. It's my big soapbox issue. Maybe you guys can all be grateful you don't have to listen to it. The Good Samaritan Law. It protects you from being sued if you try to help somebody in an emergency. It doesn't cover you when people call you up and say, what should I do about this funny thing on my arm? You know, that's going to happen a lot. So think about that. And if you have one of those people that you're not sure about, just always refer them to the doctor. Hang on, someone's at my door. So if you're not sure, or if they just seem weird, tell them, I think you need to go to the doctor. All right, I'm being beckoned for a meeting. So I'm going to finish this one and start it to be uploaded, and then I'll finish up the PowerPoints in the next one.